Hey, Cavs fans, Spencer German, Spencer Davies, back with you on a beautiful day in
Yeah, I need the
Independence,
sunscreen
Ohio.
out here right now.
We're not used to this, right? We're
No.
usually in the arena
Yep.
doing this thing on the basketball court with
Yeah.
dimmed lights. It's beautiful out here in Independence, and we just got done hearing from Koby Altman, Cavaliers president of basketball operations, about 30 to 40 minutes ago, and there was a lot to, I think, unpack in terms of what he said, what he talked about. Obviously, the big talking point, of course, the partying with JB Bickerstaff as they kind of go their separate ways here. I got to say, Spence, I think I'm starting to understand these end of season Koby Altman press conferences a little bit more now after these last couple of years, because it feels like Kobe comes out and he has a lot to say, but what he's actually saying, it's just a lot of like posturing and kind of like keeping things close to the vest. Because I think a lot of Cavs fans probably walked away listening to this press conference today, and they probably felt like it wasn't like the stuff he was saying was like blasphemous, like talking about, not maybe moving on from Darius Garland. We'll get into that a little bit and some of these other things. And it's like, well, how can they not think there needs to be sweeping changes? And how can they not know what they're looking for in a new coaching candidate? But I think a lot of that is just kind of the politicking of these types of settings and these types of things. So I picked up on that, I think, after this year for sure.
Yeah, no, this is how Kobe does his business. He keeps it very close to the vest, like you said. And there's just, you can't say these things publicly if you feel a different way, right? You have to maintain your relationships, and you have to be able to make sure that you're not losing value on the guys that you have in the building, and you're not losing relationships with those guys in the building in case stuff goes the other way. So it's really just to be front facing and to be seen, I think, by the fan base. I think for the organization, just to have, I don't want to call it closure, but to be able to say, okay, he's not hiding from anybody.
Right.
Let's answer some questions. Let's figure out what's going on. And yeah, there's probably a lot of answers that Cavs fans did not want to hear from that one, because a lot of it was, let's get better with what we have. Yeah. We did all of our, big moves in the past. And, we kept referencing the net rating between Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, kept referencing the net rating between Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, and still telling us that he believes that it's going to work between all four of them.
Yeah.
And that's, something that people probably don't want to necessarily look for as they go forward. But we'll find out. We'll find out how quickly, whether this is, posturing or whether this is actually how he feels.
That'll play out over the next couple of weeks, so we'll talk more about that throughout this conversation. But obviously, the big topic to start with, and it was where Kobe started the entire press conference, was just his remarks, his thoughts on JB Bickerstaff and the job he did. He was really, really careful not to, for lack of a better phrase, kick the man while he's down. He wasn't going to throw dirt on him on his way out the door and rag on all the things that were shortcomings for him, why they moved on from him. I think the two big things he mentioned were, one, somebody asked him about just the urgency to win now. And he mentioned flat out, like, I think that's part of the reason why we did part ways with JB Bickerstaff, because we feel that urgency. We know we need to change something, and that's something that we can change and kind of get a different perspective in here. And along those lines, his commentary just on how they felt it was time to get just a different viewpoint, a different perspective, a different voice in the locker room. That was maybe the most telling thing he said about JB. And we know from just things that have kind of played out this season, there were certain times where maybe JB Bickerstaff wasn't the most adored person in that locker room amongst the players. And so I think there's certainly something there where they're kind of like reading the tea leaves and understanding, like, we need somebody who's going to take this team to the next level, and that everyone's going to kind of be bought into, and a fresh perspective was the right thing for them.
And I don't like that trope that, the guy that got you there can't get you over the hump. I'm not a big fan of that, but it seems around the league and the NBA, and if you just look at the amount of hirings and firings there have been in the last, few years, a lot of coaches have been scapegoated. A lot of coaches have, kind of gotten the blame when it's really on the players. But in this particular case, I think that this is the right move, just because a new approach is what this team needs. Maybe they need to dig into their depth a little bit more. We noticed the last 3 seasons how the Cavs have just not been able to finish out years with the same momentum that they started with or that they had in the middle of the season. And yeah, you can use injuries as, a reason why. And I feel like that's not even an excuse in a lot of these situations. And that was the most, telling moment, I think, of this entire press conference, was Kobe talking about This just isn't a Cavs problem. This is a league-wide problem with all the injuries that have happened around the NBA. And you're looking at the playoffs and how many stars have been sidelined, and a lot of it's soft tissue injuries. Some of them's freak accidents. Is it a how long the season problem goes? And that's an entirely different conversation. But truth of the matter is, the Cavs post All-Star break have fallen. They've regressed going into the postseason.
Yeah.
And, that's just not going to cut it. And you need to maintain that kind of consistency that you're looking for. And look, incremental growth every year. You go from the play-in tournament, you go to a first-round series, and then you go to a second-round series this year. And that deserves applause. I don't care who you are. There's astronomical standards set by a lot of the fans around here because of what happened with LeBron James and those teams that were going to the finals every single season.
And that's within the fans' right to do that for sure. But you're right. I think that's changed the perspective of this franchise, especially when you're less than 10 years removed from that. So it's still so fresh in our mind.
It wasn't so long ago they were a 22-win basketball team, guys.
Yeah.
And even Kobe mentioned that about Golden State keeping their core together, Boston, Milwaukee. He looked at all these other teams that have had the same core, at least core 2, core 3, that have just kind of found a way to make it fit around the guys and given them leeway and the amount of time that it takes to necessarily get to the next step that they want to get to. But I feel like this move by ousting JB Bickerstaff is saying, okay, incremental success isn't where we're at now. We're there to get to the next tier, and got to figure it out. You got to figure it out. And a lot of it, again, we're going to get to this, is talking about in-house improvement and making sure that these players develop.
And that's that urgency piece that he mentioned, obviously, is just feeling that pressure. And it's unfortunate in some ways, because I do agree with you, Spence, that we love to throw out the idea that, well, this coach can only get you so far. And I think there's probably some coaches that's true for. You bring with the Warriors. I think Mark Jackson was an example of that. He got the Warriors to a point, but it was Steve Kerr who took them to that next level. So I think that does play out in certain instances across the NBA, but I don't think it always has to be true. It's unfair to put a coach in that box every time.
I want to give you an example, too, not to interrupt your thought.
No, you're okay.
Denver has stuck with Michael Malone for how long, right? Mike Budenholzer was around for Milwaukee for a little while before they took him to the curb.
Until that year they won, he was on the hot seat every single game in the playoffs.
And he wasn't a championship coach, right? And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Some of these teams that do stick with it. Even Brad Stevens was around for a while. They didn't fire him. They ended up elevating him to the front office. But they've kept the same people in the building. Yeah. And I think that's really paramount to success, because you have to take your lumps on the way there. Yeah. Now, this isn't the kind of lump you wanted to take, losing in 5 games to the Celtics in the second round, but you still did improve. It's incremental, but it's still, you got better.
Yeah, and I do think I do think on some level, it's just kind of life in the NBA, which again is unfortunate, because there's so many coaches that probably
We're good.
There's so many. There's so many coaches that maybe don't get that opportunity. What I'm trying to say is, the coach is the easiest thing to sort of say, let's change that. And on some level, I'm sure coaches get scapegoated all the time because of that. It is unfair. But it's also just life in the NBA right now. And I think JB Bickerstaff would even admit, he knew what he signed up for when he became a coach. It's kind of just part of the job, and you kind of know that this could happen. And the Cavs are trying to kind of change things up, and it's an easy thing to change without having to completely maybe overhaul your roster, to be well, let's get somebody else in here and see if they can be a different straw to stir the drink and get this team on a different spot.
Right, and it's a schematic thing too. I feel like the core 4 can work together if you give them the right kind of way to go about it with Max Strus, right? Being a floor spacer, playing faster, looking to see what happens when Donovan and Darius play off each other, but maybe Darius plays off the ball because, Donovan's been, ball handling a lot more. Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, maybe Evan Mobley improves upon that 3-point stroke that we saw this season. And Evan Mobley, I think, did a good job of that late in the year, of adding to his arsenal in that fashion. And he doesn't always have to be on the block double-wise. It doesn't have to always be that way. Jarrett Allen is obviously really good in pick and roll, but maybe you try something different than just being so pick and roll centric. Those are the things that I think they're looking for. Maybe have a little bit more of an open mind to do other things on the floor with a different coach, again, with a different mindset, different approach. This is why Koby Altman is is optimistic in his tone about what's in-house, because they did win 48 games. They did get to the second round of the playoffs, gave Boston the fight that they could with guys just basically limping in and on crutches. And they did a decent job, but I feel like you can do more to help Donovan out.
Yeah.
In the sense of that, I really think it does kind of go to coaching in the offense and maybe taking his usage down a little bit in the postseason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that was a problem I think that a lot of people brought up with JB, was just the usage of Donovan Mitchell, trying to preserve him for the playoffs, and that is something that needs to change. I think, though, the fact that it seems like they're having positive conversations, and Kobe alluded to that, and the fact that they see a path forward with him, and he's talking about the future, that was, I think, the big thing that resonated with me, was him saying that Donovan in their exit interview sat down and was just thinking about, here's what things could look like moving forward. That, to me, is a sign that he sees at least some path forward with the franchise. It isn't just, I'm out of here, I'm done. And it goes along the lines of what we talked about with him at the end of that series against the Celtics. Like, we saw LeBron with the infamous taking off his jersey in the tunnel. It's kind of like a signal of, like, I'm done with this franchise. Donovan was, like, out there at half court, meeting his teammates when he was on the bench, trying to coach them up, trying to help them. Like, that all speaks to a guy that, at least it seems like, wants to be here. I think that's obviously the good news for the Cavs.
Yeah, he's doing good at that. So if he does want out, he's a heck of a politician, if that's the case.
Unless he's just really playing poker really well.
I was gonna say, he liked to tweet about how the media is trying to get him out of Cleveland.
Yeah,
like that right there, I think, is even just showing, like, maybe he is annoyed by all this, but also maybe he's playing a game. This is why I don't like doing the guessing game. It's not fun for anybody, and everybody always asks me, oh, what do you think is going to happen? I'm like, well, dude, there's a bunch of variables here. Bunch of variables. If you had to ask me, I think one of the core four is probably going to get traded. But who knows what happens?
Let's go there next, because the other big thing, and we talked about at the top, like, that Cavs fans might be disappointed to have heard from Kobe today, was this idea that he didn't feel like they need to make any, he called it, sweeping changes.
Right.
He also was asked point blank about splitting up Mitchell and Garland, and splitting up Mobley and Jarrett as well. And his response was very much like, he cited the numbers. He said, hey,
he loves net rating, folks.
Net rating with those guys together was better than without. He'd mentioned the injuries and how they only really played 28 games, I think, together this season. All the core four, if we're still calling it that, all together. So I thought that was notable. Now, this is where I feel like, again, it's the politicking thing. He's not going to sit here and drag somebody in a public setting and then try to trade that guy and make drop their value or hurt that relationship, because if it doesn't work out, you need to still be able to keep that guy around.
Only Pat Riley can do that.
Yeah, Pat Riley. Yeah, he's the only one, and he basically can just throw his rings down the table, and you just got to deal with it. But yeah, so I think, but I thought that was an interesting note, that it felt like he's more reserved to, at least publicly, hey, if we have to run it back, we're okay. But I still agree with you that I think there's something here that's going to get changed up, because I think running it back with the exact same group, I understand there's a new coach coming in, but running it back with the exact same group, it feels like Einstein's definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over the same way and expecting different results. So I think they're going to have to change something. But right now, I think Kobe's kind of playing that politicking game.
Right. And you don't want to just be Utah Jazz East, right? Like that was, I think, what Donovan wanted to get away from. And it felt like, this year kind of was that in the postseason. It was Donovan and a lot of the other guys, until Evan Mobley obviously stepped up when he got to the 5 and had an amazing series against Boston, when he figured out how to attack his matchups and how to really, get that roll going and even spread the floor. So I think a lot of this is also on Evan. Evan's the big thing here. Because look, I mean, Darius Garland, we can be honest about Darius Garland. He's not going to be as bad as he was last year. That's just not going to happen. There was a lot going on in his life.
People forget, like, his first year with Mitchell, he put up very similar numbers to the year before when Mitchell wasn't there. Mm-hmm. They just it kind of got overshadowed by Mitchell, and people didn't feel like he rose up in certain spots, and that's fair. You're going to criticize a guy for not maybe showing up in the playoffs. Yeah. But yeah, like I think what we saw from Garland this year was probably his worst season, but we still seen him play at a high level, and we know he can do it.
100%. And I think another big factor here too is that it's been reported that Rich Paul would request a trade for Darius Garland if Donovan Mitchell resigns. So that's another kind of thing to look at here.
And it's also interesting because, and Kobe talked about this, like the relationship between Mitchell and Garland.
Yeah.
And it does seem like they get along very well.
They do.
They seem to have an awesome relationship with each other, and he alluded to that. But
it's not the end all be all.
Yeah, but from a standpoint of like Rich Paul being his agent, he's got to do what's best for his client, and so I can understand where. Listen, I understand why people might not have liked what Kobe said today, but you can't tell me that if you and I can sit here and recognize that maybe they don't work as well together on the floor because they're very similar players. And if an agent that's around the sport with a certain client is recognizing that, there's no way Koby Altman isn't recognizing that too on some level. Even though he's going to cite the net rating thing, like there's some truth to this. Like there's no way we're seeing it in league circles. It's just like a complete mystery, you know?
And then when you think about it from a salary cap standpoint too, you're going to have to get Evan Mobley a rookie max extension this summer. And if you extend him and you're extending Donovan, you have a max contract that's already in stone with Darius Garland.
Yeah.
Jared Allen's at a very valuable deal right now, but that's a lot of money to carry for 4 guys. And you got to think about the luxury tax, 1, and 2. The formula nowadays, I think you can't just have all of those big guys on there and then just surround them with minimum contract guys and mid-level extension guys or mid-level exception guys.
I mean, I think that
you have to have balance throughout your roster.
I think the age of the super team is like the way of the dodo now. Like I look around, like look at the teams that are left in the
Phoenix dead, Los Angeles dead, other Los Angeles dead.
A team like Minnesota, who's kind of burst on the scene here, like they were a homegrown built team through the draft. You can say similarly with Dallas, although they added Kyrie, but they have some pieces there that have been there.
They added auxiliary pieces in P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford. You know, like
it's not like none of the teams that are left are these mammoth super teams with 3 max guys and a bunch of role players, like you said. So I think you're right. Like that is kind of the mindset I think going forward for this Cavaliers group as they look to kind of build this roster. And yeah, something's going to have to change. What I would say is I wouldn't hold on to every word from what Kobe said today. I think we're going to be able to anticipate that there's going to be some larger changes because frankly there has to be.
Yeah, no, and it doesn't have. It's not like they're in the worst position ever.
Yeah,
they do have 2.
And that's the thing I want to say too, because so many people were hanging on that Celtics series is like every game if they lose, we got to blow it up and start all over.
No.
And that was I'm saying that's speaking for Cavs fans. That's not, and maybe it was just me reading too much on social media, but like guys, they have avenues forward.
Yeah.
With the roster they have, like they have movable assets that they can do something with. I understand they don't have a lot of the picks right now, but they can figure this thing out. There's a clear path forward. If Mitchell says he's going to stay, yeah, you probably do have to think about moving Garland. If he says he's going to go, then you make Garland back as the centerpiece of your running your offense as the point guard. Like it doesn't have to be the sky is falling just because they lost that series. Like there's a distinct path forward, and I think that's the good news.
And they've inched forward too. And if you look at the press conferences, post-game press conferences after Game 5, you can hear that in their voices. You know, they're definitely disappointed with how it ended, but they're also optimistic in what it can be. And, you know, Darius Garland was talking about the offseason. Evan Mobley's talking about the offseason. These guys are eager to get better and to show what they're capable of. And, again, it's going to take some development on their part. And, you know, hopefully they can stay healthy next year because that's the biggest thing I think you have to figure out is how to manage these guys throughout the regular season so that when they're in the postseason, by that time, they're not just absolutely cashed out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
You can find the entire Kobe Altman press conference at the Cavs Insider YouTube page.
It's also on X as well.
It is on X as well via the Cavs Insider _FN Twitter account. He talked about a lot of other stuff. The development of Evan Mobley, he kind of alluded to like, yeah, we could just make him a 20-point-a-night guy and give him the ball, but then we're in kind of win-now mode, so we can't do it that way. I thought that was interesting. He did admit, this is the first time I think the organization has said it publicly, that Jared Allen's injury was more than just a contusion. He called it a cracked rib, and then he called it a punctured rib. I think we're sort of surmising that it was like a crack that maybe could have led to a punctured lung is kind of I think that's kind of the way we're reading in between the lines on that. But obviously the gist of it was that was more serious than what the team had initially led on.
Yeah.
And that's why you didn't see him return to the playoffs. real quick, Spence, because I noticed somebody commented there was a section there we lost all our audio because the thing went muted when we lost connection. So
Okay.
I just want to go back real quick
Okay.
to get us out of here. Rattle off some of the names that you think make sense for the Cavs
Yep.
to be the next head coach of this team.
Kenny Atkinson, assistant for the Golden State Warriors, had 4 years with Brooklyn and was, in all honesty, probably unfairly ousted just because of the situation there with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan starting over Jared Allen, who happens to be here. James Borrego, an assistant for the Pelicans, who coached the Hornets for 4 years, and in his last year went 43-39, best record they had since 2015-16, and he still got the boot. So those are two of the top ones. If you want to look at assistants, former Canton Charge head coach Alex Jensen is on the Dallas Mavericks bench. You can look at Sean Sweeney, same thing, Dallas Mavericks assistant, more defensive focused.
Yeah.
There's a wide net that's going to be cast out there. So definitely just kind of pay attention to those names, and there's going to be more that are going to come out as we go along in this process. And again,
the big thing you mentioned, though, you think it's going to be something that a move that's catered more towards how can we improve this offense.
Offense first for sure. And maybe we're not going to see as much pick and roll, and we're going to see a little bit more of a little bit more creativity, I guess you could say, and maintaining pace, because pace is the biggest word here.
Yeah. All right, guys, we appreciate those of you who stuck it out with us. I apologize for some of the technical difficulties.
It's hot out here, guys.
It was hot out here.
I'm sweating.
My phone was a hot spot. It got too hot, shut down. We were connected to the building Wi-Fi. It was kind of spotty. I tried to get it back connected. We got muted. I apologize, but it's
a whole ordeal.
We tried to cover all the bases. We tried to get you the gist of this thing. I will implore you to head over to CavsInsider.com or si.com/Cavaliers in order to follow along. I think it's actually si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. Sorry. To follow along with all things Cavaliers related. We'll have a bunch of stuff up from this press conference today. And as always, you can find us over at the Cavs Insider YouTube channel as well. Spence and I should be back at some point leading into this offseason, whether it be leading up to the draft, on draft night, all those different things, bringing you more Cavs coverage. So I appreciate you guys jumping on in as you have all season long. We hope to talk to you guys again soon.